We're going to move on to the next Kinnos Test Zayin of our passage.
B'shus harabonim hatalmidei chachamim. In Kinnos Test Zayin, we read Zachor asher asa tsar bifnim. We read about Titus, what he did inside Beis Hamikdash, the holiest place in the world. In Beis Hamikdash, in Kodesh HaKodeshim, the youth, the old, young and old, were shocked as they saw what he did. What he did to the physical structure, what he did to the Kelim of Beis Hamikdash. So we all mourn. We've been mourning for 1953 years, but do we mourn for the physical structure that we lost? For Klei HaKodesh, that Titus took from there and stole. The truth is that today we have much more impressive physical structures, much more grander, bigger in every single aspect that you can imagine. So what do we mourn? Beis Hamikdash was created in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have his Shechina dwell among us. The pasuk says, "Ve'asu leMikdash ve'shachanti b'soicham." V'shachanti is the language of Shechina. It's the same letters. It doesn't say if they will make a sanctuary for me. V'shachanti b'soichoi, in it. It says b'soicham, in them, in the heart and soul of every Yid. So when the Yid makes a space in his heart for the divine, it resides there. But when the Yid no longer makes a space for Hashem in his heart, the Shechina is removed. The Shechina departs. It comes out that in Tisha B'Av is not actual day of the Churban. The Churban came much earlier, a much earlier date, which we don't know exactly when it really happened. But it did happen when the Yidden no longer made a space in their hearts for the Shechina. And therefore, when Nebuchadnezzar arrogantly praised himself, I was successfully able to destroy the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as if he said, I am stronger than Hashem. The answer to him, as we see in Sanhedrin Tzadivav Amud Beis, was, you fool. Heichal saruf sarafta. Heavenly voice emanated from Shemayim and said, you burned down a place which already was decreed to be burnt. Kemach tachun tachanta, eitzim ve'avonim shibarta. Ground flour, you ground, sticks and stones you broke. Because the Shechina was already removed. The Shechina was no longer there. And that is the Avelus today. It's for the lack of space in our hearts for the dwelling of the divine. Lack of intimacy. Lack of connection. Lack of open and revealed love. That is what the Beis Hamikdash represented. We say lack of open and revealed love because there is still love, tremendous love, from the Ribbono Shel Olam to us. And Hashem sobs and weeps for our exile even more so than we do. But it is hidden. It is concealed. And that perhaps is what Sefer Haredim writes. And Rabbi Tzak Hutner made a song out of it, changed a little of the words, but we all know the song. In my heart I will make a sanctuary, a place for the divine. And when we do, the physical structure of Beis Hamikdash will come back. So when we read about Titus's terrible actions, what he did in Beis Hamikdash, it reminds me a totally different story. A double of Titus. His name was Hitler. But after the war, on the way to Shul, the Baba of a Rebbe who was in the States saw a person who looked very unkempt, very sad. And he came over and he said, maybe you want to come with me to Shul and put on tefillin? And this Yid looked at him and says, no, thank you. And the Rebbe looks at him and says, tell me, do you know how to be a chazan? Yeah. Maybe you want to come to Shul and be a chazan? Oh, chazan? I'd like to be a chazan. Yeah, I'd like to come. And he comes into Shul, and the Rebbe honored him to be the chazan. Fine. A week later, the Rebbe again goes to Shul. This time it's on Shabbos. The Rebbe was walking with his son Naftali, and they saw this guy sitting right in front, the entrance to the Shul, smoking a cigarette on Shabbos. And the Rebbe asks him, maybe you want to come again to shul and be the chazan? The guy says, yeah, I like being the chazan. Yeah, I'd like to come with you to shul. They go into shul, and Naftali, the Rebbe's son, goes over to his father and says, Abba, what are you doing? He's Mechalel Shabbos. How can you take him to be chazan? He's Mechalel Shabbos. The Baba Rebbe looks at his son and says, what are you calling him Mechalel Shabbos? Why do you say he's Mechalel Shabbos? And his son says, Tati, didn't you see? He's smoking on Shabbos at the entrance of the shul. Befarhesia, he's a Mechalel Shabbos. And the Baba Rebbe looked at his son and he told him, Naftali, it's not this guy who's smoking. It's Hitler, Yemach Shemo, that's smoking. It's the Nazis, Yemach Shemam, that's smoking. He's not smoking. Fast forward 50 years. The Rebbe didn't see this guy for 50 years. One day, a guy who looks the part, is a nice steimer, big long payas, comes to the Baba Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, maybe you don't remember me, but 50 years ago you invited me to your shul to be the chazan on Shabbos when I was smoking outside. I'm marrying off my grandson. I'd like the Rebbe to be the Mesader Kiddushin. And the Rebbe said, when is the chasna going to be? And he told him, he said, I'm sorry, I can't come to the chasna, but maybe I can come to one of the Sheva Brachos. And he told him when the Sheva Brachos will take place. The Baba Rebbe came to the Sheva Brachos. There were 100 little kinderlach, his grandson, grandchildren, all with little payas, all looked apart. And he comes in, and this Yid says to him, Rebbe, these are not my children. These are your children, Rebbe. You honored me 50 years ago. You didn't reject me, even though I was smoking a cigarette at the entrance to the shul. And you said, no, it's not him, it's Hitler that's smoking. It's the Nazis that's smoking. You brought me close, Rebbe. These are your children. That perhaps is the highest level one can attain in Noise ba'olim chaveiroi. And we also learn about judging people favorably through this maaseh. From the actions of the wicked ones, Titus, the Hitlers of the world, we should be awakened to unite with the tzaddikim of the world. And the Navi Yeshaya already said, Ve'amech kulam tzaddikim. But we have to open our hearts. We have to find the nekuda of tzidkus in each and every one, because it's there. And if it's too hard to find it, so don't even try to look. What do you need to find? Negative points in others. For what? What do you gain? If Beis HaMikdash was destroyed for sinas chinam, for machloikis, for Lashon Hara, Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt when we rectify those. The Chafetz Chaim's son-in-law, Rav Levinson, came to Eretz Yisrael once, and they took him to Makom HaMikdash. He took him to see the Koisel. And he was crying. And when he left, went back to Chutz La'aretz, and they asked him, so, what's there? What's there in Yerushalayim? What did you see? And he told them, you know, it's been so many years, almost 2,000 years of the Galus, but Baruch Hashem, we still have two things left. From the time of the destruction of second Beis HaMikdash. Still two things with us. And they said, what are those two things? And he said, well, the Koisel is still there. And they said, what's the other thing? And he told them, Baruch Hashem, the Satan of Sinas Chinam is still with us. The same Satan from 2,000 years ago of Sinas Chinam that destroyed Beis HaMikdash is still around with us today. You can see it and you can understand why Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. But the Satan is not one that cannot be beaten. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's up to us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the tools. He gives us the skills. He gives us the wisdom, the brain, and chokhmah. But we need to want it. And when we do, Bali Taher Mesai in law, when you come to purify yourself, you get heavenly assistance, but we need to want it. And that is our challenge. to really look at each other and find the beautiful, beautiful points, and there's so many in each and every one of us. Look in the mirror and see how beautiful you are, and those things that you love. And maybe there's a few things that you're not crazy about. Same way you look at yourself and you're willing to accept yourself. After all, I'm pretty okay. I'm doing okay. I'm pretty decent. You should love your fellow kamoicha. The same way you accept yourself, to be willing to accept yenim, accept the other. And when we do, Mitzvah Hashem, soon speedily in our days, we will see Satan being on the floor, lying down on the floor, being shechted. Beis HaMikdash coming back, and the Shekhinah, the divine, will dwell in each and every one of us, not only in the physical structure in Yerushalayim, in the physical structure that we call us, man, in our hearts and in our soul. We read now Kinnos Tes Zayin.
We move forward now to Kinnos Chaf Aleph, Arzei Alavanai, Agarim Pesach.
In Kinnos Chaf Aleph, we read about Asara Harugei Malchus, the 10 Tzadikim Gedolei Yisrael, and we read about their terrible end, Misos Meshunos, terrible, terrible tragedies. Tragedies not just to their families, to Klal Yisrael. But why is it a tragedy for me? I'm not related. None of them were my relatives. What does it have to do with me if I didn't know this specific Gadol? And this doesn't apply necessarily to the 10 Harugei Malchus of yesteryears, and this apply in every single generation. Many people who go to ask Gedolei Yisrael for their guidance, for brachos, but many people wonder, what does it have to do with me? Why do I have to go to Gedolei Yisrael? Why is it so important to have yira and kavod to Gedolei Yisrael, as the Kodesh Baruch Hu equated his own honor and fear to that of tzaddikim, talmidei chachamim? What is it connected to me? Rabbi Elia Lapian said an unbelievable thing. In Pashas Vayera, Avraham Avinu davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that for the merit of the tzaddikim in town, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should nullify the decree, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds, Perek Yudches, Pasuk Chavav, Vayomer Hashem, you know what? Fine. Im emtza bizdom 50 tzaddikim b'soich ha'ir, if I'll find 50 tzaddikim in town, v'nosasi lechol hamakoim ba'avuram. If I in fact find 50 tzaddikim within the city of Sodom, I will forgive the whole place for their sake. And at the end, the Kodesh Baruch Hu was even willing to forgive for 10 tzaddikim. But there weren't 10 tzaddikim around. Said Rebbe Lepian. And tell me, what would happen if in fact HaKadosh Baruch Hu would find 10 tzaddikim? The Gezeira, the terrible decree against Sodom and the neighboring cities, would be cancelled, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would forgive. But what about the people of Sodom? Would they change their ways? No. Would they be aware of this? Would they know what happened between Avraham Avinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu? They would know that there are 10 tzaddikim among them, and because of that, their decree was cancelled? No. They would continue about their life, their terrible way of life, without knowing that their neighbor, the guy with a long white beard, all the way down to his beard, who always goes around with a suit, shuckles near his stender, he saved them. He saved their family. He saved the entire town from terrible, terrible decrees. Death. Said the Be'er Lapyan, and who knows how many decrees are cancelled, how many times the Kodesh Baruch Hu forgives us without us even knowing, because there are tzaddikim around us, because there are chachamim, talmidei chachamim, and gedolei Yisrael among us. Do we even know? So why do we go to them? To seek their guidance. We also have a brain. Why can't we use our own? And we must use our own. So why do we have to go to talmidei chachamim? Let's play a little game. If this wasn't in Zoom, I would actually ask you to respond. But we're not going to do that. We don't have a lot of time. But just take a few seconds. I'm going to say a few words and just think that the first thing that comes to mind when you hear these words. World Trade Center, Twin Towers in New York. Just think for a few seconds. What comes to mind? A 5-bedroom apartment. A new 5-bedroom apartment. What comes into mind? The first thought that you have. A tank. What about the Yarkon River near Tel Aviv? Or when you walk in the street and you see a sign, your neighbor's yard, it says, beware, there's a dog here. What do you think about? I think most people think, when they hear the World Trade Center, about 3,000 dead people. Terror! 2 planes that crash into those buildings. But you know what Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach thought about when he heard there's such an unbelievable 2 skyscrapers called the World Trade Center? When they first told him, there's gigantic buildings, more than 100 stories. He said, wow, that's very interesting. You know what that means? That there could be 2 babies that are born exactly the same time, but they're going to have a bris milah on different days. And they looked at him, what do you mean? And he said, well, if they were born 2 minutes before Shkia, the first one at the bottom floor, and the other was born at the top floor, more than 100 floors above ground. Over there, it's still not Shkia, there's still 20 minutes to go. Down there at the bottom, it's already Shkia. He's going to have to be malin 9 days. The other was born all the way at the top floor. He's going to have to have his circumcision in 8 days. Fascinating. That's the first thought that came to his mind. What's a 5-bedroom apartment, a new one, cause us to think about? If you're a man, mistama, a nice, expensive mortgage. If you're a woman, maybe a view to the ocean. Or how are you going to decorate it? Reb Chaim Kanievsky's grandson came to him a few years ago and he said, Rebbe, I get a mazel tov. We just bought a new apartment, a 5-bedroom apartment. And Reb Chaim says, oi, it's going to take you so long to do bdikas chametz. That's the first thing that he thought about. Bdikas chametz. Tank. I think when we think about a tank, we think about a war, blood, soldiers. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky was young. He was in a koiled. Young man. There's a war. And he was taking another sefer, and he was looking at this and going here, going there. And somebody came to him in the koiled and says, Rebbe, you're continuing as if business as usual. You aware there are tanks outside? They're shooting, there are missiles all over. Aren't you afraid? And Reb Chaim's first reaction says, a tank? The nafkamina of a tank is only if it's a kli, that's mekabel tuma or not. Is it a vessel that can become tameh or not in halachic matters? What is Nahar Yarkon? Yarkon River in Tel Aviv. I think when we think about it, many people who grow up in Eretz Yisrael are taken for a school trip to that river. You go a little boat, you have fun. The Stipler, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, took his son, Reb Chaim, to the Yarkon River to pick aravois many years ago. So he goes one direction and Reb Chaim goes the other direction, and suddenly the Stipler yells, Chaime, Chaime! That's how he used to call his son Reb Chaim. And Reb Chaim runs over and he says, what happened then? And the Stipler says, look, here's the Yeruka She'al Pnei Hamayim that we say in Bameh Madlikin. Look, I see the Mishnah here in the Nahar Yarkon. That's what he saw. What about when you see a sign, there's a dog here? If you don't like dogs, you cross the street. If you do, you try to look at this cute dog. Reb Nissim Karelitz used to go for a walk. The doctors told him, you must go for a walk. So he listened. And he was walking with someone and he saw, there's a sign, there's a dog here. And Reb Nissim's first reaction, oh, so that means bones in Bnei Brak and Shabbos are not muktzeh, because if there's a dog, you're allowed to be metaltel the bones, they're not muktzeh. What do these stories tell us? We always have negius, we have a personal agenda. Talmidei Chachomim, Tzadikim, Gedolei Yisrael, don't have blood in their veins, they have Torah in their veins. It's the first reaction. What does the Torah say about this? They think Torah, they eat Torah, they drink Torah, they go to sleep with Torah, they get up thinking about Torah. They dream about Torah. It's a life of Torah. It's a living Sefer Torah. That is what a Godel is. Yalkut Shimoni in Mishlei Remes Tav Tav Kuf Samech says, Im bikashta litol eitza min haTorah. If you want to take advice from the Torah, hevei notel. Take advice from the Torah. This is how you do it. You go to a living Sefer Torah. Will it definitely work? Depends on Rebbeinu Shel Olam, what he decides. But where would be the best place to go to get the purest, cleanest advice that you could possibly get? That's only there. A person who doesn't have any gaiva, a person who always fights with his Yetzer Hara and beats it, that's what you should go. It says in Medrash Rabbah in Shmoi Saba Parasha Gimel Siman Ches, Kol hanoitel eitza min haskenim eino nichshal. If you take advice from the elders, you will not stumble. So why do we go to Gedolei Yisrael? Who wouldn't go to Gedolei Yisrael? That's the only place. You connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the highest level. He equated his honor, his fear, to theirs. You come to a place where you see how a person should conduct himself. How HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to look to a living Sefer Torah. And when they are taken from us, we read in this Kinnos about 10 Gedolei Yisrael. But this applies to every generation, because in every generation the Gadol that we have, the Gedolim that we have, are representatives of Hashem that He sent us to us as His representatives. They are taken from us. It's not a personal tragedy for their Talmidim or for their family. It's a tragedy for Klal Yisrael, and the truth is for the entire world. Now all of us cry for Gedolei Talmidei HaChachamim, the tzaddikim that were taking from us, the Asara Harugei Malchus, and the tzaddikim in every generation.
We're going to continue on right now to Kinnos Chafei, Miten Rosh Shimayim, Professor.
In Kinnos Chafei, Miten Rosh Shimayim, we read Ayeh HaTorah ve'ayeh Lomdeiha. Where is the Torah? Where are those who study it? We read about the Mesirus Nefesh, the Torah, in mitzvahs, the Kiddush Hashem, in different Kehillas. In the time of Beis HaMikdash and until our times. For example, the Kehillos of Bermaiza, Worms, Magenza, Giboirei Koyach Lekayim Dvar Hashem. I want to share with you a remarkable Maaseh that happened during the Holocaust, of Giboirei Koyach. There was an old man who just passed away not too long ago from Bnei Brak. His name was Reb Shlomo Reichenberg, Zichrono Livracha. He is the father-in-law of Rosh Yeshiva of Nesivos Oilam, Yeshiva for Balei Tshuva, Reb Yosef Brook. And he told over that he was 16 years old when he entered hell, that we called Auschwitz. There was a time in the camp that there were 3,000 people in the camp. 10 people would sleep on a small wooden plank. And one day, an older gentleman comes to this little 16-year-old Shlomi Reichenberg, and he grabs him in the middle of the camp and starts beating him up. No mercy. And he's literally breaking him to pieces. And he's all bleeding, and he says to him, "What do you want from me? What did I do to you? I don't even know who you are. Why are you doing this?" And this guy says to Shlomi, "You don't know what you did. Come with me to barracks number 10 and you'll know exactly what you did." In barracks number 10 there was an old Jewish fellow who was like the judge of the camp, the arbitrary. If two people had a fight, they would go to him and he would decide what you do. So they both go to barracks number 10 and they stand up in front of this older fellow. And he asks the guy who hit, "Shlomi, what's going on?" He says, "Well, Shlomi will tell you." So he looks at Shlomi, 16-year-old Shlomi Reichenberg, says, "What's going on?" He says, "I don't know. I don't know who this guy is. Look at me. Look what he did to me. I'm all bleeding. I don't know. I never saw him in my life." So again, he looks at the guy who hit him and said, "Why did you do this?" He says, "Very simple. I saw Shlomi Reichenberg smile today. Not once, twice." So he looks at him and he says, "So, can't one smile? Is there an issur to smile?" And he says, "Well, if he's smiling, he must not be starving to death like we are. We are starving to death, and when you're starving, you don't have koyach to smile. And if you are smiling, that means you're not starving." But wait a second. The Nazis didn't give an ounce extra, one crumb extra. So how is it possible that he is not starving? Look at the rest of us. If he is not starving, that means he's satiated. That means he's snitching on us. That means he's cooperating with the Nazis, and if he's cooperating with the Nazis, of course they have to beat him up. This fellow looks at Shlomi Reichenberg and says, "Listen, he has a good case against you. He has a good taina. What do you have to say?" And 16-year-old Shlomi Reichenberg says, "I'll tell you the truth. A few months ago, I was able, along with a few friends, to smuggle a pair of tefillin to the camp. And since then, not even one day that I missed putting my tefillin on. And you know, in the middle of the day, sometimes I think about it. My mesirus nefesh to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my love, my dedication to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to His mitzvahs, makes me so happy. And yet, it's true, they took my parents, took the rest of my family. Yisurim here are terrible. I am starving to death. But my feeling is that I'm able to beat the Satan in his own home. And every time I think about it, I smile. It's a great feeling. I'm fighting with the Satan, I'm beating him in his own house. And you see who's nefesh, my commitment, my loyalty to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to His mitzvahs. So yes, I smile every so often. Not because I cooperate with the Nazis. Chas v'sholom, I try to cooperate with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What causes us to smile? Maybe we need to rethink, reshape our prioritization. In all the different channels of media, they keep selling us that if we will buy this specific item, we will be happy. If we will go on vacation to this specific place, with this specific person, then, in fact, we'll reach the pinnacle of simcha. Shtusim v'havolim, much more than that. A sheker, a true lie. And as one gets a little older, he sees how foolish that is. The true simcha, the everlasting simcha, that cannot be shaken, comes from one thing and one thing only. Kirvas Elokim. The real close connection, the bond that one has with the Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us true, eternal simcha. When one is willing to give everything, his entire being, to Torah and to mitzvahs, to his relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, he is elated and he doesn't need anything else. I want to share with you another Maaseh, a different angle of that very same thing. There was a Froom editor of a Froom magazine who went around, did a survey, asked many people, tell me, if you had the option to invite 3 people from the past, from our Jewish collective past, to sit and eat one meal with, whom would you invite? Many people, many answers. Each one said something else. But many said, oh, my father passed away many years ago, I miss him. I would like to eat with him one more time. I would invite my father. Some said I would invite my Rebbe. Oh, he was an Adam Gadol. So close to him. Some say, I would invite the Chazon Ish. I would like to eat with the Chazon Ish. I feel very close to his Torah. Others said the Rambam. Some people said the Rashbi, Reb Shimon. And lehavdil elef alfi avdolo, some say Albert Einstein. Others said Avraham Avinu, Yitzchok, Yaakov Avinu, and David HaMelech. And I think those are all fantastic answers. But when this editor asked this same question to Reb David Feinstein Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, whom we just lost last year, Reb Moshe Feinstein's son, he asked him, whom would you invite? 3 people from the past, our Jewish collective past, to eat with. And his first reaction was, 3 people? I would invite 3 hungry people. What is the difference between the first answers and Reb David's answer? Each one of those people who answered first was actually thinking, how can I benefit myself? I miss my father, I miss my Rebbe. I want to meet a very distinguished individual. I want to be able to put on my resume, sat and ate dinner with Avraham Avinu. I want to take a picture with David HaMelech. I want to compensate for what I don't have, or to gain something else. But Reb David, he was thinking differently. What can I do for others? That was his first reaction. The Navi Micha Perek Vav Pasuk Ches says, Higid lecha Adam ma toiv. Tell you what's really good. Uma Hashem doiresh mimcha, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu demands of you. Ki im asos mishpat, do the right thing. Justice. Ve'ahavas chesed, and love chesed. It doesn't say asu chesed. It doesn't say that we should do chesed. It says that we should love chesed. What's the difference between doing chesed and loving chesed? I think the difference is simple. When you're commanded to do chesed, you will. Check mark. Been there, done that. When you're commanded to love chesed, you look for opportunities. How can I help others? What might the other person need? How can I be of service? After 1953 years, maybe we have to recalculate. Just like Waze does all the time. Why can't we do it? Waze does it multiple times in one trip. We can recalculate a new route. If it's because that we didn't think about each other. The house was destroyed. In every generation where the house is not rebuilt, it implies that we are still holding on the same level, which means if the Beis HaMikdash was up and running today, it would immediately be destroyed. Could it be that it's the time that we have to start thinking about others? When we do, speedily in our days, the house will be built with all its glory. Next year, Mitzvah Hashem, not going to do a Zoom gathering. He's going to do a Hisachdus of Klal Yisrael and this Yontif. Rav Sussman is going to organize for all of us. Oneg Tisha B'Av, Tafshin Pei Beis. Next Tisha B'Av, Mitzvah Hashem, Haba Aleinu Letoiva, will be a unbelievable, festive, joyous day for Klal Yisrael Bechol Makom Shehem, but it depends on us. Strengthening our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mesius Nefesh, all out. And thinking about others. What can I do to help? The last pasuk in Tehillim Kuf Yutes, David HaMelech says, Ta'isi keseh oved, bakesh avdecha. I'm lost, like a sheep. Went away. I can't find my way home. We look, we want to find the way home. What is the right path? Ta'isi keseh oved, I am lost like a sheep. So we request HaKadosh Baruch Hu now, after 1953 years, you, bakesh avdecha. Because Chazal say in Kiddushin, Baal HaAveda is the one who goes looking for his lost item. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are a lost item. Ta'iti keseh oved, you seek us, bakesh avdecha. But the pasuk continues, Ki mitzvoisecha loy shochachti. Because I didn't forget your mitzvahs, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm still connected. So if we can testify on ourselves, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are still connected. Mitzvoisecha loy shochachti. I didn't forget your mitzvahs. I try to do what I can, each one on his level, and we try to go higher and higher. But mitzvoisecha loy shochachti. So then we have the right to ask, maybe demand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bakesh avdecha, seek your servant, because I am lost and it's hard for me to find the way home. And in Mitzvah Hashem, when we do, we're all going to celebrate Oineg Tisha B'Av, hosted by Rav Sussman in Sharei Beis HaMikdash Tafshin Pei Beis.